Let's go ahead and flip the motor over and let's look at the main caps, see what kind of clearance we got in them. Remember, we've got at least a 30,000 mile motor, and it has never had a shim taken out of mains or rods. So they all feel pretty good. I just shook them and rattled them, and while they all feel good, we'll go ahead and check them. I'm going to use a little plastic gauge. There's a couple of methods of doing that. One is plastic gauge or a receipt from like Walmart. You can cut you a little strip and lay it in there and tighten it down. If it locks up and you can't turn it, it's serviceable, usable at that point. But I'm going to take these cotter keys out and we'll pop a cap and take a look. Another thing, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't find a lot of metal embedded in these, because we lost a lot of metal out of that drive plate, and the drive plate didn't have a freeze plug in it. So some of it could have migrated up here. We don't know. We'll just take a look and see what we got. Let's go ahead and take our rod. We'll start with number 4, pop it loose. And we want to be careful that we put the cap back on the same place. And if we drop any shims, we want to make sure that the shims are on the same location so we don't get confused here. So we'll be kind of careful on this first one. Well, actually on all of them. And everything. Okay, so there's our cap off. Shims are still in place. There. That rod has a little bit of an unusual wear pattern to it. Get a piece of plastic gauge here. I'm going to wipe off the journal so my plastic gauge will tend to stick to it, and I'm going to leave the cap oily. Set that right there. Put our cap back on the same direction. In this case, it's easy to tell because the dipper goes towards the cam. So I'm going to run these back down to 35 foot-pounds. So we can see where our plastic gauge stayed on the crankshaft, and the plastic gauge wrapper has 2 scales, one's millimeter and one's thousandths. So we'll make sure that we get on the thousandth side. And right through here, that's about 1.5 thou. Over here, it's probably more like 2. Yeah, it's between 2 and 1.5 thou. So that's within specifications, 1.5 thou to 2 thousandths clearance. So that rod is pretty decent shape. Wouldn't have any issues cleaning it up and washing it up. It does have a little bit of funny wear here. I would probably pull a shim out of it and take a little time saver and work that rod in just to kind of clean it up and see if it did clean up. But it does have, as you can see, it does have a little funny contact on it. May have been that way from day one. So we'll do the rest of the rods the same way, check them. I'm going to go ahead and remove this rod and piston out, and we'll mark it because we're also going to check our bores. So we'll do all the rest of them the same way, and then we'll flip it over and check our bores. So knock the piston out, and I'm just looking at the babbitt here, and lo and behold, I got cracked babbitt. Right here it's cracked, here it's cracked, there it's cracked, there it's cracked. So even though the tolerance was pretty good, it's broke up. I have a sneaking hunch I could probably peel that babbitt out. I'm gonna go over to the lathe mill deck and just drop this cap on and see if it rings. Just see what we got. But this rod's no good. I wouldn't reuse it. Well, I removed the last rod, and all of the rods are cracked up on the rod side. So we're going to have to do new rods, or have the rods reconditioned. So I don't know. That to me tells me we had a bad babbitt job, because the clearance was okay. Thou and a half on all of them, or a thou and a half, 2/1000ths on all of them. None of them was out of line, and all of them are cracked up here on the rod side. So I think it's just a bad job of tinning. Didn't get a good bond there, and it broke loose. Let's just turn the engine back up on its nose, and one, I'm going to watch and see if I got any. I don't believe I've got any thrust clearance issues at the third main, but we'll just go ahead and check and see where we're at on this one. We'll take a look at the air gap that we have on this field coil, see if it was okay. A little bit more about the main shaft. Not only is it off center and all of that stuff, but the bearing surfaces on this main shaft are just, they're gone. So that would be another reason why I'd find a better main shaft or replace it. And another thing I notice is the magnets are really weak. So we would do it anyway, but this one needs to be recharged if we're going to run it on coils. And we plan on, while it had a distributor in it, we do plan on setting it back up to where we can run it like what Henry did. So we know that we'd need to recharge the magnets. The air gap is no closer than 25 and no further than 40. And I like to shoot for 30, but this is a 25/1000ths gauge, so I'm just going to drag it around and see if anything is closer than 25. And I'll spin it just one time or so, just to make sure. There's one that's a little snug, but when I get it over to the next one, it's clear. So fundamentally, we have 25/1000ths clearance. And I'll put two gauges together, and this is a 40, and I don't want it to be able to slide in anywhere. And there it does, there it does, there it does. Now I can't get it in, can't get it in. So let me index this a little bit. Over here on the back side, I can run this 40/1000ths through it. So the field coil was not set up correctly. That's not why Bill was running a distributor. It's just what he started off with, and that's what he kept, and never did try to run it on the Magneto. So the Magneto wasn't set up correctly. Maybe the guy that built the motor never had any intentions of running it. However, it looks like a fairly new reconditioned field coil. So maybe the guy that had it before ran it and didn't run right, and so he stuck a distributor in it because it's not set up correctly, nor the magnets got any charge in them. So that might be the reason the distributor was on it to begin with. So let's go ahead and I'm going to lay it over. I'm going to take the flywheel off now at this time, get it out of the way. And that might be interesting because this is a Model A crankshaft, and whoever put the engine together did not relieve the third main to where you can get a wrench on it very easy. And the relief is just a very minor amount that needs to be removed, but it isn't done. So this is liable to get interesting. There was safety wired. That's a plus. And they wired it the correct way. Well, that one's wired backwards. That one wasn't wired the right direction. I guess sometimes you think if you just have it wired in there, it's done, but that one was done right. Well, let's see if we can get it to come loose. See if we can even get a wrench on it. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Looks like he took a chisel. I'm just going to roll them. That ain't going to work. A bit of a struggle getting these bolts out of the flywheel, and I'll show you. And I'll show you more when we get the flywheel off. But all of these bolts, the heads are just horrible on them. And then all of them have galled in to a weld on the flange of the Model A crankshaft where they shortened it. This was really a struggle getting these out, but we got them. And they're junk now, and they'll be thrown away. But let me get the flywheel off, and then we'll lay the engine back over, and I'll show you what caused a lot of problems. And that's entirely wrong. And that shouldn't be that kind of a struggle to get that off of there. So you can see where they've taken the flange off and turned it down and shortened it. Model A's about 5/8 of an inch longer crank. And so they shortened it by cutting it off and putting the flange back in its place. And I've seen better jobs where that's been welded together. Come on. And I've already loosened up this third main because we had to be able to get enough clearance to get a wrench on it. But these bolts, they're in enough relief on this bronze cap to where you can get it on there and get a wrench to work, and it's just biting in to both the cap, and then if you can see where they didn't clean the weld up on this flange, and that's what galled it on these bolt heads surfaces, the flange surface. A little more work and it would have been just lovely, would have been oh so nice. But That's kind of amateur hour at the OK Corral again, as far as I'm concerned. I've seen a lot better work done. So there's our third main off. And it wasn't making very good contact either. Was using this cap Ben Hardiman was making back when he had Texas T, and it's a magnesium bronze, and you can thrust off of that surface. In other words, there isn't babbitt out here for a thrust. This guy elected just to thrust off of that bronze, and that's okay. I mean, a lot of modern tractors, a lot of tractors were built where they just thrusted off of that rear main, just like that. So let's get us a piece of plastic gauge, drop across there and torque that back down, just see what we got. I'm going to wipe that journal down a little bit. Keep oil on the cap. I'm not going to remove it. About 70 pounds, 65, 70 pounds of torque, and see what we got. The abominable snowman went over to the corner. That's Mr. Terry Finn out of Memphis. We got a little bit of traffic going on here today. Got people from all over the countryside in here. I need to get this field coil out of the way because Mr. Howell's torque wrench won't let us get in here to read it. So I'll just get this out of the way right now. Okay, so we got our field coil out of the way. Cool. All right, so now let's layer back over. Let me torque down. And I lost a shim. There it is. Okay, so what I see is we've got between 1.5 to 2 thousandths clearance on the plastic gauge. That's millimeter side. Here's a thou, so see a thou and a half. It's a little bigger than 2 and a little less than a thou and a half. So the main would be pretty good to use, and you can check the thrust, which there's hardly any in this one. So the thrust is fine. This thrust should be 3 to 4 thousandths, and we probably got that. We don't have anything more then. So we'd do the same thing, checking it. If we were going to put it back together with this crank, we would keep all of our shims and our mains in the correct orientation. So when we go back together, it would fit without any work. Again, not very good contact on that babbitt. If I was going to use it again, I would probably pop a shim out, maybe each side, and use time saver to run them all in. And I bet we find the same thing on all of them. Okay, got all the main caps out of the way and the shims and set them over there in order. just get the crank out of the way for right now. We'll take a better look at that flange that they welded up. And now I'm just going to look and see what the pour and the blocks look like. Remember, we had an awful lot of metal missing off of that drive plate, and it didn't have a plug in it, freeze plug in it, so I don't know. I guess maybe some of it could have migrated into the engine, because we never have really found anything. But Bill does change his oil every 500 miles pretty religiously, so that might be an account for why we don't see. But this babbitt in here, we just weren't making very good contact. This front one especially, it was just making, it's shiny as heck right through here, and the rest of it's dull. So I don't think the bearings were fitted very well. If you wanted to reuse that crank and reuse this babbitt, the caps looked okay. No cracks or breaks in the babbitt. You could probably pop a shim out and take some time saver and run that back in. And again, a lot of it depends how you're going to drive this car. If you're going to take off on long trips and want it to go and go and go, you might just decide to change a few things up here. But this is what we got. So I'm going to get the front plate off. We're going to remove all the valves and see how those look. And then we'll summarize where we're at and where we think we're headed.